converting the suitcase material into something even more. You're watching Creative Redundancy, the one that likes to create, the one known as CR. And here we go. First of all, I gotta actually sort out the material first, so I have to undo all this stitching. I'll reuse all the thread from this. I'll reuse the zipper for something else. It's not included in this project here.
A few moments later.
Make a cutout. Cut. Now I'll take the material, put the right side at the bottom, and trace on the opposite side of it. Minimizing any waste by using up all the space that I can. While I'm cutting this out, I'm making sure I have the straight side straight and the curves, curve as much as possible, following along the line that I created for it.
I'll reuse the scraps too for something else.
So it's time to stitch in a pun. And so I put the good sides opposite of each other, lined up the edge on that corner right there, and sewed in stopper knot, and then started to use back stitches to connect the edges together. Slightly inward, about less than half a centimeter. And every time I was sewing it, I was always making sure the edge was lined up by just holding it temporarily while I was sewing this. And of course, I started going back and forth on it, started to connect where the thumb is right there, using back stitches, reconnecting my thread every so often because it got pulled out, as you can tell right there, and just kept going with this. Alright, here, now I'm coming closer to between the index finger and the thumb part of this when I'm sewing here. I actually had to make sure this was done fairly well, because it's moving, or a movement area on this that I'm making here. So you can see, and right where the bottom, that V part there, I actually had to make sure that was very sewn very well, and I made a connection right where that V is in this. Then coming back around onto the finger parts and just went all the way around using back stitches and trying to kind of keep my line, that my sewn line or sewing line, lined up as the best that I could. Ding ding! So keep going along here. I actually had to go back on the opposite corner and start that side and come back around and connect the lines together, the sewing lines together. And of course, I actually had to do this twice, this step, because I actually was making double-sided or two sides for this, so I had to do this again. So after you get both sides, so now it's time to connect them together. And basically, it's the same thing. Join the corners together first here. Basically, wherever my sewing line was from the previous two steps or previous step, I'm just trying to follow along that the best that I can. And just using back stitches back and forth here. And basically, I'm just using reclaimed thread for this. I didn't use any new thread for this. Just stuff I had laying around from previous projects, previous scrap material I had that I unsewn and unstitched to recover that thread. Of course, I actually had to make sure I was going along that sewing line that I made previously from the previous step. Alright, here I'm around where the index finger and the thumb connect here. And just like the previous step, I'm gonna make sure that I do this quite well. And the holes or the anchor points are in certain spots, like between the index finger and the thumb, like I said earlier, because this is a movement part of this project, so it's gonna move back and forth, so I have to make sure it's nice and secure and fairly tight stitching. Okay, now I'm going to add in this trim along the bottom of this. It's not necessary, you could just sew it on, but I decided to add it on. Basically, I'm using a binder clip to hold it in place. I'm pushing the material into the center fold of the trim and sewing that together with back stitches and using a stopper knot at the beginning. And always making sure you're sewing through all parts of the materials, both the trim and the project. Because actually, when I was doing this, I kind of messed up right about there, and I actually had to redo this part off camera. So keep that in mind if you do anything like this for your own project or similar projects that have trim. And along that edge right there, I actually had to make sure I did it in a certain way so the thread would be on both sides of the edge and in the middle, just to keep it going. And of course, then I went all the way back around along the cuff here, just using those back stitches back and forth. And like I said earlier, making sure you put the thread through all the material, so you're actually stitching all the material together as much as possible.
It's time to suit up!
Gotta try this out and use it out there. More protection from the elements.
As our world changes, we can adapt too. Skill and knowledge get better with practice. Can't help everyone, but one can help someone.